Hello everyone. This week, we'll explore the horror hidden in everyday life, from a late-night hot dog vendor and a ghostly ice cream truck, to secrets buried in an ancient market. Let's listen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The ice cream truck's jingle. Maple Creek was a perfect picture of Californian suburbia. Manicured homes sat behind white picket fences, and the sound of children's laughter often filled the warm, jasmine-scented air. For Sarah, it was the ideal place to raise her 7-year-old son, Leo. It was safe, predictable, and profoundly normal. That normality shattered on a Tuesday night. Sarah was woken by a faint, distant melody. It was Pop Goes the Weasel, played in the tinny, metallic chimes of an ice cream truck. She squinted at her digital clock. 12:14 a.m. She must have been dreaming. Who would be selling ice cream at this hour? She listened, but there was only silence and the familiar chirp of crickets outside her window. Shaking it off as a fragment of a dream, she rolled over and fell back asleep. The next morning, as she was spreading jam on toast for Leo, he looked up at her with his wide blue eyes. "Mommy, did you hear the ice cream man last night?" Sarah's throat went dry. "You heard him too, sweetie?" "Yeah," Leo said through a mouthful of toast. He played a happy song. "I wish he'd stopped." A knot of unease tightened in Sarah's stomach. It hadn't been a dream. That night, she stayed awake, waiting. And at precisely 12:14 a.m., it came again. The tinkling, unnervingly cheerful tune, drifting through the stillness of the night. This time, it sounded closer. She slipped out of bed, tiptoeing to the living room window that overlooked the empty, streetlight-washed road. A vintage ice cream truck was rolling slowly down the street. It was painted a faded white and pink, with the peeling decal of a grinning clown on its side. The words "Jolly Tunes" were written in a playful, looping script. The truck moved strangely, gliding almost silently, with no rumble of an engine, only the relentless jingle of the music box. As it passed under a streetlight, Sarah squinted, trying to see inside. The driver's cabin was lost in shadow, but she could have sworn there was no one there. The truck continued on, the music growing fainter until it was once again swallowed by the night. The third night it came again, and the fourth. It became a dreadful ritual. Sarah grew tired, dark circles forming under her eyes. She asked her neighbors. Most shook their heads, saying they'd heard nothing. But old Mrs. Gable, who had lived in Maple Creek for over 50 years, had a different reaction. "An ice cream truck?" she asked, a flicker of old fear crossing her eyes before she quickly masked it with a brittle smile. "It must be teenagers with a prank." "Don't you worry about it, dear." Her haste to dismiss it was more alarming than denial. While Sarah's dread grew, Leo's fascination blossomed. He started talking about the Music Man. He drew pictures of the Jolly Tunes truck in crayon, always with a smiling stick figure waving from the service window. "He has all the flavors, Mommy," Leo said one evening, pointing to his drawing. "The Music Man told me he has a special one just for me. Rainbow Swirl." The blood in Sarah's veins ran cold. "He told you, Leo? You spoke to him?" "Not with words," Leo said, with the simple logic of a child. "In my head, when I hear the music." That night, Sarah decided to confront it. As the melody began its nightly crawl down the street, she slipped on her shoes and crept out the front door. The air was unusually cold. The music seemed to vibrate in her chest, both melodic and menacing. The truck glided closer, its headlights dark. She stood in the shadow of the large oak tree in her front yard, her heart pounding. As it passed, she looked directly into the driver's cabin. It was empty, completely and utterly empty. The steering wheel was motionless. She raised her phone, trying to snap a picture, but the screen just filled with gray static. The truck slowed as it drew parallel with her house, and the melody seemed to focus, aimed directly at Leo's upstairs bedroom window. A wave of raw, primal fear washed over Sarah, and she fled back inside, bolting the door. The next morning, she dropped Leo at a friend's house and drove to the town library. Something Mrs. Gable had said, that flicker of fear, had stuck with her. She spent hours poring over the local newspaper's archived microfilms, searching for anything about ice cream trucks or strange happenings in Maple Creek. And then she found it. An article from the summer of 1978. The headline read, "Fear Grips Suburb as Third Child Vanishes." The article spoke of a man named Arthur Jolly, a beloved ice cream vendor who ran the Jolly Tunes truck. He was a neighborhood favorite until 3 children disappeared over the course of a month. Jolly was the primary suspect. Other children said he had a special flavor he only gave to his best friends, but no evidence was ever found. A week after the last child vanished, Arthur Jolly and his ice cream truck disappeared without a trace. Sarah printed the article, her hands shaking. The grainy, black and white photo of Arthur Jolly showed a gaunt man with a smile that was too wide and eyes that were hauntingly vacant. That night, Sarah had Leo sleep in her room. She wasn't letting him out of her sight. She sat in a chair, clutching a baseball bat, listening to the silence. But midnight came and went. No music. A fragile sense of relief began to settle over her. Maybe she had imagined it all. Maybe her fear had manifested it. It was almost 1 in the morning when she was finally nodding off, when she heard a sound. Not music. The soft, creaking click of her own front door. She bolted from the room. The front door was ajar, opening onto a sliver of black night, and Leo was gone. A strangled cry escaped her lips as she ran outside. The Jolly Tunes truck was parked at the curb, silent and still. The service window on its side was open, spilling a cold, ethereal blue light. And walking toward it, clad in his Superman pajamas, was Leo, moving like a sleepwalker. "Leo!" Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with terror. He didn't turn. "He has my flavor, Mommy," he said, his voice strangely flat. "Rainbow swirl. He's been waiting." As Leo got within a few feet of the truck, a shadow materialized in the service window. It was formless, but Sarah could see a hand extend. A long, thin hand with fingers like dry twigs. The melody began again, not from the truck, but from everywhere at once, loud and jarring, a nightmarish version of the familiar lullaby. With a furious cry, Sarah launched forward. She didn't think. She just acted. She tackled Leo, wrapping her arms around his small frame and sending them both tumbling onto the damp grass just as those bony fingers were inches from his pajamas. There was a loud slam as the service window shut. The melody cut off abruptly, the resulting silence more deafening than any noise. The blue light vanished. Sarah lifted her head, gasping for air, still clutching and now sobbing Leo. The truck was gone. It hadn't driven away. It simply wasn't there anymore. They moved within the week. They left the perfect house, the perfect lawn, and the white picket fence behind. As they drove out of Maple Creek for the last time, Sarah didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew the music man was still there, driving the quiet streets in the dead of night, playing his happy tune, patiently waiting for other children who wanted to try his special flavor. And sometimes, in the deep silence of their new home hundreds of miles away, Sarah thinks she can hear a very, very faint melody on the wind, and the blood in her veins runs cold all over again. To Clara, London's Blackwood Market wasn't just a workplace. It was a living, breathing creature. By day, it pulsed with a chaotic symphony of shouting vendors, haggling shoppers, and the mingling scents of exotic spices, new leather, and 1,000 flowers. But when night fell and the wrought iron gates were locked, the market took on a different life, a quieter, more ancient one, made of the echoes and memories soaked into its centuries-old cobblestones. Clara had poured her life savings into securing the lease on one of the market's oldest stalls, a tiny, dark oak space tucked away in a less-traveled corner. It had belonged to a Mr. Abernathy, an old florist who had retired abruptly. The stall was neglected, the wood chipped and stained, but it possessed a charm that was undeniable. Clara spent weeks scrubbing, painting, and transforming it into her own floral paradise, petal and stem. The first few days were magical. She rose before dawn, selecting the freshest blooms from the flower exchange and arranging them into vibrant bouquets. The smiles of happy customers and the hum of the bustling market were everything she had ever dreamed of. It was only at the end of her second week that she noticed the first oddity. She was staying late to finish a large order. The market was deserted, save for the wind whistling through the empty laneways. As she was trimming the thorns from a rose stem, she heard it. A soft, almost inaudible sound, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. A whisper. She straightened up, listening. Silence. It must have been the wind, she told herself. But a cold sense of unease settled over her. Over the next few days, the whispers continued, always at the edge of her hearing, always when she was alone. They were fragments, nonsense words, promised, so cold, waiting. They seemed to cling to the air itself, coming from no particular direction. Then she noticed the flowers. In the back left corner of the stall, where one floorboard looked older than the rest, her flowers died. Not just wilted. They withered and turned black within hours, while the rest of her stock remained fresh and vibrant. She tried everything, new soil, different water, even moving them into the sun. Nothing worked. That corner seemed to radiate an invisible blight, leeching the life from whatever she placed there. Driven by a growing fear, Clara began asking the other vendors about Mr. Abernathy. Most shrugged. He kept to himself, they said, a man who lived for his flowers. But Alfie, a ruddy-faced greengrocer whose stall had faced Clara's for 40 years, hesitated. Abernathy, he changed, Alfie said, lowering his voice. Years back, after his wife, Alara, left. Left? Clara asked. I vanished one night. Left a note, they say. He was never the same. Grew possessive of that stall, almost like he was guarding it. That night, the whispers were louder, more urgent. As Clara was sweeping, a pocket of intense, bone-chilling cold enveloped her, making her gasp. And in that cold, a voice came through, clearer than ever before, a woman's grief-stricken whisper right beside her ear. Under the roses. Clara dropped the broom. Her heart hammered. Under the roses. She looked to the dead corner, where a sad bouquet of white roses had turned to ashen gray. Fear warred with a powerful, inexplicable urge to know. Waiting until the last of the security guards had made their rounds, Clara locked the stall's shutter from the inside, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. With trembling hands, she moved the withered pots aside, exposing the old floorboards. She tapped on them. Most gave a solid thud, but the one in the very corner, returned a hollow echo. Using her gardening knife, she worked at the edges. The old wood groaned in protest. Finally, with a splintering crack, the board came loose. A rush of musty air, smelling of cold earth and cloyingly sweet rot, billowed up. Beneath was a small, shallow space, and in it sat a small, rotted wooden box. Her breath hitched. She didn't know what she had expected, bones perhaps, but this was a surprise. Carefully, she lifted the box out. It was surprisingly light. She worked the rusted latch open and lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, lay a few items. A tarnished silver locket, a lock of dark hair tied with a ribbon, and a faded photograph of a beautiful young woman with laughing eyes and wild hair. Alara. The moment Clara's fingertips brushed the cold silver of the locket, the whispers exploded in her mind. They were no longer fragments, but a torrent of memories, emotions, and pain. She saw everything through Alara's eyes. She saw Abernathy, not as a stooped old man, but as a passionate young one who loved her fiercely but possessively. She felt her love for him, and the growing suffocation as his love turned into a cage. She heard their arguments, her pleas for freedom, his refusal to let her go. And then she saw the last night. There was no violence, no shouting, just a cold desperation. Abernathy had begged her to stay. "I won't let you leave," he'd said, his eyes burning with a strange light. "I'll keep you here forever, amongst our flowers." Alara hadn't understood. But then she saw him, by the light of the moon, performing a kind of old folk ritual, a dark gardener's magic he'd read about in an old book. He had taken her lock of hair, her locket, and a rose from her favorite bush, and he had buried them beneath the stall where they'd spent their happiest days. It wasn't a curse to kill, but one to bind, a way to tether her spirit to the place he loved most, so she could never truly leave him. Alara's physical body had been taken far away by Abernathy, buried in an unmarked grave, but her soul, her essence, was trapped, imprisoned in the wood and earth of the stall, able only to whisper her sorrow to the flowers, causing them to wither with her grief. Clara scrambled back, gasping, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't just heard a story. She had lived it. Alara's pain was her own. "Free me," the spirit whispered in her mind, a clear, aching plea. "Please." Clara knew what she had to do. The next morning, she didn't open her stall. Instead, she took the small wooden box and caught a train to the coast, to a place she had seen in Alara's memories, the Seven Sisters Cliffs, where Alara had always dreamed of visiting. She walked for miles along the white chalk cliffs, the sea wind whipping at her face. Finally, she found a secluded spot overlooking the churning gray-green water. There, she dug a small hole and placed the box inside. "You're free, Alara," Clara whispered to the wind. As she covered the box with earth, she felt a shift in the air, a lightening, a release. The pressure in her mind dissolved, and the grieving whispers finally fell silent, replaced by a profound sense of peace. When Clara returned to Blackwood Market the next day, the stall felt different. The air was no longer heavy. The chill in the corner was gone. As a test, she placed a vase of fresh white lilies in that very spot. They didn't die. They thrived, their petals unfurling to the light with a vibrancy she had never seen before. The stall was no longer a prison. It had become a memorial, and her flowers now seemed to bloom brighter than ever, as if in thanks to the girl who had listened to the whispers from the old stall. The last customer. The wind howled through the concrete canyons of Chicago, a lonely sound Leo had grown accustomed to. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and the city, ever bustling, was finally beginning to succumb to sleep. His hot dog cart, Leo's finest, was an island of warm, yellow light on a deserted street corner, steam rising from the grill to mingle with the crisp October air. Leo was wiping down the counter with a worn rag, his movements slow and practiced. This was the end of his shift, a ritual repeated night after night. He'd served the drunks, the weary cab drivers, and the lonely insomniacs. He'd heard every kind of story, from wild boasts to slurred confessions. Tonight had been no different until he arrived. Just as Leo was about to switch off the flickering neon sign of a hot dog, a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't unusual. There were always stragglers, but something about this one made Leo pause. The person moved with a strange silence, their footsteps making no sound on the pavement. The figure stopped at the counter. It was a man, or at least shaped like one, dressed in a dark overcoat, the collar turned up to hide most of his face. A battered fedora shadowed the rest. Still open. The voice was low and flat, devoid of any inflection. It sounded like dry gravel scraping together. "Just in time," Leo said, forcing his usual friendly tone. "What can I get for you?" "A hot dog. Plain. Just mustard." Leo nodded and turned to the grill. He plucked a sizzling sausage, nestled it in a soft bun, and drew a perfect yellow line of mustard across the top. As he worked, he felt the stranger's eyes on him, a heavy, unnerving sensation. He tried to break the tense silence with small talk. "Cold one tonight, huh?" Wind cuts right through you. There was no reply. Leo glanced over his shoulder. The stranger was standing perfectly still. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold traced its way down Leo's spine. He placed the wrapped hot dog on the counter. "That'll be $2.50. The man lifted a gloved hand to the counter. The fingers were unnaturally long and thin. He placed 3 single-dollar coins on the stainless steel surface. They clinked oddly, a sharp, cold sound. As the man took the hot dog, his coat sleeve slid down just a fraction. Leo caught a glimpse of the skin beneath. It was pale, almost translucent, and spiderwebbed with dark veins like rivers on a map. "Thank you," the stranger said. He didn't leave. Instead, he stood there, slowly unwrapping the paper. Leo busied himself by pretending to clean, rearranging already neat condiment bottles. He couldn't shake the feeling of being scrutinized, judged. The silence stretched, broken only by the wind and the man's small, neat bites. "You've been working this corner a long time, Leo?" the man asked. Leo started. He wasn't wearing a name tag. The cart didn't have his name on it, only Leo's finest. "Long enough," he answered cautiously. "How do you know my name?" The man lifted his head slightly, and for the first time, the light from the cart caught his face. His collar had parted, and the hat was tilted back just enough. And then Leo saw them. The eyes. They weren't human eyes. There were no whites, no irises, no pupils. Just 2 deep, empty pits of solid black that drank the light and reflected nothing. They were like chips of a starless night sky, holding an endless, vacant expanse. Leo's breath caught in his throat. His entire body went rigid. He wanted to scream, to back away, but his feet were nailed to the floor. His mind scrambled for a rational explanation. Specialty contacts. A prank. A trick of his tired mind. But deep down, he knew what he was seeing was real. The man didn't seem to notice Leo's terror, or perhaps he was savoring it. He took a final bite of his hot dog, chewing slowly, deliberately. "Names are written in many places," the stranger said, his voice just as unnervingly flat. "Most people just don't know where to look." He crumpled the wrapper and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then he leaned forward on the counter, and those black voids seemed to peer right through Leo. "This city has secrets," he whispered, his voice now a dry hiss. "Secrets older than its skyscrapers, deeper than its lake. There are doors about to be opened, Leo." Leo could only stare, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "There will be a night, soon," the stranger continued, "when the moon hangs in the sky like a weeping wound. It won't be silver white or harvest yellow. It will be the deep, dark red of old blood." He paused, letting his words sink in. "When you see that, Leo, do not admire its terrible beauty. Don't look up. Pack your cart, go home, lock your doors, and do not look outside until the sun rises. There are things that hunt in that light, and they do not like to be seen." With that, the man took a step back, melting into the shadows from which he came. He didn't turn. He simply receded into the darkness, and the darkness seemed to swallow him. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. The silence he left behind was heavier and more terrifying than his presence had been. Leo stood frozen for several minutes, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, the shaking started. He rushed, clumsily, through the rest of his closing routine, his hands trembling so badly he dropped a salt shaker. He didn't care. He slammed the service window shut, locked everything, and all but ran to his old pickup truck parked down the street. On the drive home, he couldn't stop glancing up at the night sky. The moon was a slender, pearly white crescent, hanging amongst the drifting clouds. Normal, perfectly normal, but the warning echoed in his head. The color of old blood. Weeks passed. Life returned to normal, but only on the surface. Leo kept working, serving hot dogs, wiping his counter. But he did it now with a gnawing dread. Every customer who approached in the dark made him jump. Every person who lingered too long made his heart race. He began to fear the final hours of his shift. When the city grew quiet and the shadows deepened, he tried to convince himself it had been a dream, a cruel joke. But the image of those eyes, two abysses of soulless black, was burned into his mind. One night, months later, as he was driving home, he noticed a strange glow in the sky. He pulled over to the side of the road and got out. Hanging over the Chicago skyline was a full moon, but it wasn't silver-white. It was a deep, dark crimson, an ominous, brooding red, like a great bruise on the face of the night. It cast an eerie light, tinting the clouds and the empty streets below in its ghastly glow. The stranger's warning screamed in his ears, as clear as if he were standing right next to him. Don't look up. But it was too late. He had already looked, and in that blood-red light, he could see figures moving on the rooftops, long, thin, not quite human shapes, scuttling silently under the gaze of the blood moon. And he knew with a terrifying certainty that they had seen him, too.